Welcome, everyone, to episode 68 of the Gully Blanchard podcast. My name is Ryan, coming to you from the great state of Sacramento, California, home of the return of DeMarcus Cousins last Thursday. That was a very fun game to be at New Arco Arena. With that being said, this was originally a one-man podcast. I brought some of my friends in to make it a little bit more fun. And I decided to reach out to people from all different walks of life, whether it be Eagles fans, wrestling fans, and selfishly, this is my podcast, so I can pretty much talk to who I find interesting. You can follow me on Twitter at Gully Blanchard, Gullyblanchard. You can check us out wherever you get podcasts by searching Gully Blanchard. This will be episode 68. They're all going to be available for you to check out. We're also on iTunes by searching Gully Blanchard. Subscribe to get all the new episodes, rate, review, let us know how good we're doing. And another place you can check us out is all 68 episodes are available at gullyblanchard.podbean.com. It's starting to get a little bit cooler out here in Northern California, which is a good thing. I was getting a little tired of running my air conditioning on at the end of October. But enough about that. My beloved Philadelphia Eagles are 7-1. I'm starting to believe, and by believe I mean I know I'm setting myself up for a heartbreak, but I wanted to bring in a guy who covers the Eagles. We talk pretty frequently on Twitter. I think he gets my charismatic sense of humor, my off-putting sense of humor sometimes. He's a really good follow. So without further ado, Justin Grasso, Inside the Eagles, man, how you doing?
I'm doing great, and thank you for saying my last name right.
No problem, man. Do people get that? Is that where they go with Grasso? How do you?
They say Grasso.
Oh, jeez.
So
okay.
I was told it's pronounced Grasso, so that's what I stick with.
Yeah, I always figure I've known people with the the two S's and the O, and usually the A is pronounced a little bit differently. So I wonder why people. Yeah, my name's Ryan. I get Brian all the time. I get Brian's. I get all kinds of different things. So
yeah, well, I get Jason too with Justin. So
okay, yeah, I've gotten Ryan, Brian, Rob, all kinds of different stuff, man. So I feel your pain for sure. Inside the Eagles, man, what is it? Where can people check it out? I know I check out the website pretty frequently, so I like what you guys do over there, which is something that made me want to have you on. But for people who aren't familiar, what is it? How'd you guys start it? What can people expect from it?
Well, I joined Inside the Eagles probably around like the draft time, so I was covering the NFL draft for the Eagles. And it's part of Fansided's network, which Fansided's a Time Inc. company. So it's basically, they have a bunch of sports sites. I guess they're kind of, they call them fan sites, I guess. But we have guys that, they cover their own analysis along with Eagles news and rumors. So I joined the team it was probably like in April. And ever since then, I started being the co-editor along with this guy, Jeffrey Knox. And, we got Eagles news all the time. So you can check it out. It's pronounced Inside the Eagles, but I call it Eagles still.
I do it too. I've always heard the nickname Eagles, but for me, it's always going to be like Eagles. But then every time I see something pop up, I'm always reminded that it is spelled Iggles. So for those who don't know, check it out.
I think it's like an old school type of thing. I don't know. Yeah. So
cool, man. So they being the Philadelphia Eagles, I'm going to say that a lot today, I'm sure, on the show. They're 7-1, best record in the NFL. They just beat the San Francisco 49ers 33-10 on, which is odd when a 23-point win seems a little underwhelming from the offensive side. But I want to get to you, man. What were some of your biggest takeaways from the game?
Yeah, it's funny you say that because, usually after, Sunday wins, I go into Monday and I'm ecstatic. And today I don't know, I didn't feel that great about it. Although it was a convincing win. I mean, the defense looked great. But, the O-line, it's a problem when you see Carson Wentz taking that many hits like that. So, and then we go into Denver who, they're not doing too good right now. But, that defensive line and that whole defense, it's scary going into that game.
Yeah, that was sort of my big takeaway, too. I thought the defense for an offense, it struggles. I thought they played as good as they played all year. Obviously they forced some turnovers with the Mills interception and, a couple other plays. I thought they did a really good job getting penetration
Mhm.
to Beathard and making it very difficult for him. But I am interested. I know when the season started, Denver was going to be one of the games that I wasn't too high on this team as of yet. Once week one hit, because I didn't know what they were going to be. But now that they're 7-1, I want to see what happens when they go up against superb units. And what I mean by that is, like, I wanted to see what happened when they played Carolina with Cam Newton, and then I want to see how they do against this Denver defense, because now with them being 7-1, expectations are getting ratcheted up to where I'm starting to think, like, okay, how are they going to be in the playoffs? So when you start seeing the best team, the best of the best these teams have, I do want to see how that offensive line is going to hold up against Denver with Pecco, Wolf, and Von Miller.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I got to be honest. Before the season even started, I marked down, once the schedule came out, who I thought was wins and losses, and I did have Denver beating us in this game. But I mean, after seeing what our defense has been able to do lately, and then you see Denver with, Trevor Simeon's just awful. I mean, I'm tweeting about him right now. He's terrible.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I mean, it's definitely going to be a good matchup. I think both teams kind of have the same issues. Like, Denver doesn't have the best O-line, and the Eagles right now don't have the best O-line. So I think they're sort of similar teams, and it's going to be a tough matchup. But I mean, I don't think the 49ers win. I don't think it was a bad win necessarily. I don't ever think there is a bad win, but it was definitely sloppy, and it makes you kind of worry about the next matchup that we have.
That was my takeaway from the first half, because I know they turned it on towards the end of the first half, which they did against Washington as well. But that first quarter, they didn't necessarily look crisp. They didn't look smooth. The offense, it took them seemingly a while to sort of get in the flow of things. Carson Wentz didn't start out too terribly hot, and I think that was a lot to do with the offensive line. And the defense played well. The defense had constant pressure on Beathard, but I think if you go into games like that in the first half they had against Washington, if that continues to be the trend as opposed to the anomaly, it's going to be really tough for them as we get into the Dallases and the Oaklands and the Seattles to consistently build on where they're at right now. 7-1 is 7-1, no matter how you slice. And I don't know if we're having first world problems, but my expectations are getting higher of this team. So I want to see what they start to do against the good quality teams, as opposed to having what felt like an underwhelming 23-point win. The main reason why I was excited was living out in Northern California. I got the win against the Northern California team, but other than that, I was more excited watching that second half against Washington than I was against this game against San Francisco.
Yeah, going into it, I didn't think we were gonna, do what Dallas did to them. Just based off the weather alone. I mean, it was bad. It was a lot of rain, so I don't want to use weather as an excuse, but it does affect how you play no matter what. So I mean, even the fact that they put up was it 33 points? I mean, it's still impressive when you say an offense played sloppy, but they still put up 33 points, even though one of them was defensive. But other than that, I mean, they still scored. They got in the end zone. So
yeah,
I think this was definitely Wentz's worst game, but at the same time, you look at the numbers and that it doesn't show, other than that interception. But I mean, I just think if the O-line can get it together, we should be fine. Sky's the limit for this team.
And that's one thing too. I want to talk real briefly about the 49ers again. I know I wanted to talk about this earlier in the show, but we got sidetracked a little. For those who don't know, the 49ers have traded for Jimmy Garoppolo. Apparently, the Philadelphia Eagles beat them so bad, and I'm going to selfishly say that. The Eagles beat them so bad, we forced them to change quarterbacks. So the Eagles traded for Jimmy Garoppolo from the Patriots. It's tough with me with Patriot backups, and I don't know how you feel about this, to where seemingly every quarterback that does well in New England, as far as, Hoyer and Ryan Mallett didn't do well, but they were part of the pedigree. You've got your Matt Castles, and even from the offensive side, your Charlie Weisses or your Josh McDaniels. Every guy that seemingly leaves them, with the exception of Wes Welker on offense, doesn't replicate that success at wherever they stop next, whether it's Notre Dame, Denver, or what have you. So I'm interested to see how Garoppolo plays. In all reality, I think that New England traded him at the right time. I don't know about Brady playing into his 40s. Right now, New England has no backup quarterback on the roster whatsoever. So I think they're going to end up adding Hoyer, who just got released by the 49ers. But what was your reaction here in this trade?
I was very shocked that it happened because I definitely thought that the 49ers were going to try and ride it out with Beathard until the season ended. And then I figured maybe like Kirk Cousins will sign with them or something.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, I was shocked. I think what they gave up a second rounder, right?
Yeah, it was a second round pick. Right now, that's projected to be the 33rd overall pick, and so you're generally pretty close to a first rounder getting what you got for your backup quarterback, which is for New England. I think that's a good deal.
Mm-hmm.
It remains to be seen what that is for San Francisco, though.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Garoppolo is going to go there and really tear it up or anything. I don't think he'll be bad either. I just don't think he had enough experience to be worth that high of a pick for in the second round. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm right there with you.
Yeah, so I think I mean, you look at Jacoby Brissett's not doing too bad out in Indy. I mean, that's a terrible team, but yeah, I mean, same situation for Garoppolo. I think the Patriots definitely got the better end of the deal there. But future wise, I mean, I have no clue what they're going to do. But at this point, are you really worried about Tom Brady being done?
Yeah, I'll come out and say I after the first couple of games of the year, I was a little bit iffy on Brady. I think you can only lose, so many receivers, and with them losing Bennett and Edelman to start the season, but Edelman, injury embedded to free agency. I was interested to see how it recovered, and I mean, it looks like they're going to cruise again to the AFC East title. New England seems to do this to where they get the better of every deal. I don't know if it's something to where they haven't mastered of how to maximize leverage in these deals, but I'd be interested to see how that works as far as did New England hit them up and say, look, we saw how bad Beathard was. We've got Garoppolo on the market, or was it the other way around? Because like you, I don't know if Garoppolo is going to go to San Francisco and set San Francisco on fire. It remains to see if he's, where he goes and how he does without that safety and security of having the New England Patriot offense.
I think just it's a combination of their coaching is well enough to where if you showcase these players for a little bit, they do good enough to just rise their trade value, and then New England gets them in desperate moments. Like Indianapolis, they thought they would have Andrew Luck back by now. I mean, it doesn't even look like he's going to return anytime soon. So they desperately needed a quarterback, and then that's where they reached out for Brissett. But and then same deal with the Niners here. They don't think Beathard's obviously good enough to carry on for the rest of the season. Hoyer couldn't cut it. So again, they were a desperate team, and they had to inquire for Garoppolo, and that was their best bet right there.
Yeah, it remains to be seen. I know one thing with the trade deadline that Philadelphia was talking about was potentially adding a left tackle to replace the loss of Jason Peters. What did you think of that left tackle position watching yesterday's game? I wasn't too keen on Vaitai. I think it's going to be tougher once you start getting the better defenses as far as the Seattles and the Khalil Macks and the Denvers of the league. So I'm interested to see how he does against them. But I didn't see a huge –
Go ahead.
I would say I didn't see a huge noticeable drop off to where it's like, oh my God, we have to move this. We have to move on getting a left tackle, and we have to sort of be desperate. I'm interested to see how it goes for the rest of the year, though.
Yeah, I think I always said Vaitai, he'll get better with time. He's still young. I mean, he's only in his second season. He hasn't had a full season yet. Obviously, you can put any tackle in there, and it's probably going to be a downgrade from Peters. That's just the way it is. But I mean, for the most part, I thought Vaitai did pretty good. If anything, the person who disappointed me was Lane Johnson yesterday.
Yes.
So aside from that one sack that was clearly on Vaitai, which you can even argue that Wentz held the ball too long, I think Vaitai did okay. And, obviously with Lane Johnson playing bad, that could have been, again, we can say he just had a bad game or his weather or whatever. But I'm not comfortable with moving Lane Johnson to the left side now like everybody wants because, next week we got Von Miller coming in. Do you feel comfortable with putting Vaitai on Von Miller?
Absolutely not. I know I don't.
I definitely don't.
Yeah, I was interested to see how losing Peters also impacted LeGarrette Blount. I don't think he had a phenomenal game, but it's another one that I'm interested to see how that impacts him when it does start to get a little bit colder as far as a weather standpoint. He does have to go against these better defensive lines.
Mhm.
How is the loss of Jason Peters going to impact them?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the run game is still really confusing in Philly because they use such that heavy rotation. I mean, they have
Mhm.
for whatever reason, Kenyon Barnes is still getting carries out there, so it's really confusing how they use that. I don't think they utilize Blunt enough, but I mean, I guess so far it's been working. But I guess we'll see what happens on Sunday.
So, what has been some of the biggest things? What's the biggest joys of the season you've had so far? I know for me that it was the surprise of the secondary with
Mm-hmm.
them losing Darby early. I was really unsure of how that secondary was going to hold up, and this has finally been the breakout year for Zach Ertz that we've been hearing about for the past 4 or 5 years. So I'm impressed with those two things. What have been your biggest two best takeaways of the year so far?
Definitely the improvement of Carson Wentz. I think that he's finally kind of gaining some respect around the league with all the MVP talks. People are finally starting to realize, like, oh, okay, you put some help around this guy and he can actually play. And because even me, I wasn't even the biggest Carson Wentz believer when this all started, but now you can't really argue it. He's doing pretty well. So that's one of the things. Second, I'd probably say, Nelson Aguilar. I mean,
That'd be another one, yeah.
he's just been huge lately, and we heard it all off season. And I joined on the Aguilar train probably. I mean, me and you talked about it, right?
Yeah,
Aguilar, yeah.
yeah, we did.
So that was probably in like July or August, and I was starting to get on the hype of that, and then preseason came around, he didn't really do anything, and then ever since week one, he's been killing it.
Yeah, one thing I've liked about Aguilar is he's kind of filled the slot role that I was interested. I know once they added Alshon and Torrey Smith, I was okay. I was thinking to myself, okay, Aguilar's probably going to be your fourth option behind those two, Jordan Matthews, just at receiver, and then you had Ertz and you had Trey Burton and things of that nature. So I was very excited to see how he was going to be as a fourth option. And obviously, when they traded Matthews, that sort of upped him. But I do like that Wentz does go to Ertz a lot. And I think that Aguilar's very good in that sort of downfield threat along with Matt Collins to where, they'll catch the ball and they'll catch the ball down the field. I love that Carson Wentz does like to throw down the field. So I think having Aguilar down there to get behind a defense when you have defenses that are keying in on Ertz and on Alshon Jeffrey and on other players, I think that's going to be a role that Nelson Aguilar begins to thrive in. And I think we've seen it. We saw it in game one with the Washington game, and then
Mm-hmm.
also the Arizona game where he's doing a good job in that role to where he's starting to get behind the defense.
Yeah, I mean, his position at USC, he was the slot receiver, so it was expected that he'd like be a lot better in the slot role. But I think just having Jeffrey out there and then Ertz, killing it now, it just opens everything up for Aguilar. A lot of the pressure's taken off of him. I always said he's not going to perform like a first rounder, but I mean, he's looking solid though.
Yeah, and I was a little bit put off on the whole first round pick when they got him in the draft, and obviously he didn't live up to necessarily those expectations. But for how they're using him and what he's doing, I've been finding his role to be extremely impressive, and I like the transition he's made. He reminds me a lot of what I thought Josh Huff was going to be
Yeah,
when they first
exactly.
picked up Huff, and just to see him transition into that role to where he's getting behind the defenses, and if nothing else, he's starting to stretch out the defenses. I think has been a big improvement for him, and it's made Carson Wentz's job a lot easier because, along, like I said, with Matt Collins, he's got someone to go deep to. I know the long touchdown that he had with Matt Collins on Wednesday against Washington was essential too because it started that positive momentum going the right way. So I'm just interested to see how that continues to develop. They're deep at receiver. I'll give them that. They are very deep at that position where they weren't last year.
Yeah, and somehow people still want Megatron on the team, but that's blowing my
Um,
mind right.
I think it's just the name of Calvin Johnson. I don't really think he's coming back. I mean, if he does, great. But I think
Yeah,
if they're going
I
to
think
fix anything by Tuesday, they're going to need to look at the offensive line fixtures.
definitely. That's our biggest fix we need. I know we lost Hicks for the season at linebacker,
Mm-hmm.
but I think left tackle is a lot more important. You got to protect your franchise guy. Plus,
Yeah,
I mean, the linebackers, they've looked great. So,
absolutely. So, are you from the Philadelphia area? Have you been a lifelong Eagles fan, or how'd you kind of come into this?
yeah, I was born in Philadelphia, so I was born right into the Eagles.
What were some of your earliest memories being an Eagles fan? Because I know I started because of Cunningham. That was
Mhm.
what got me living in San Francisco. So, what were some of your first memories of watching the Birds play on Sundays and Mondays?
Oh man, I grew up. I wasn't around for the Cunningham era. I'm a little young for that, but I grew up during the McNabb era. So obviously, that was everybody around had a McNabb jersey.
Yep.
And then when Terrell Owens came to the city, it was ridiculous. I mean, it was like just watching the Eagles. It was just so comfortable, and like this team's going to at least go to the NFC Championship. Now, it always ends in disappointment, but at least your team's going to get
Yeah.
there. So that was
Yeah.
that was definitely the fun part about growing up being an Eagles fan.
Who were some of your favorite Eagles watching growing up? So if you grew up in the McNabb era, who did you grow up sort of rooting for on that team?
Well, obviously McNabb was one. I was also a big Brian Westbrook fan,
Okay.
and then obviously Brian Dawkins. You can't leave him out.
That was so odd to see him playing for a different team those couple years he was in Denver. Like I'd
Yeah,
never
they
that
they
one
should
was
have they should have just let him ride it out here. He was still good too. So
yeah, he played well in Denver. He played very well.
yeah, I don't know what the point of that was, but yeah, I was definitely like big McNabb, Westbrook, Dawkins. I mean, I still liked Owens too for his his 1 year he played,
Yeah.
but it was a he's a cancer to the locker room, so you can't keep him around. But I mean, you really think we would have went to the Super Bowl without him? Probably not.
No, and that was the tough thing about TO, especially living out, in Northern California. I would watch so many Niner games. And that
Hmm.
was around the time to where like McNabb was going to the NFC title game with Todd Pinkston and Chad Lewis and
Yeah,
Nah Brown or Nay Brown. And not to take anything away from those guys, but I mean I tell people for years, those 3 years that McNabb took them in the title game, you'd be hard pressed to find a receiver that did more with less. Like that receiver, you had the corpse of Antonio Freeman, you had Charles Johnson, you had just a bunch of receivers that McNabb made look a lot better than they were. So when that finally happened to where they got 81, I was like, oh my god, like this is it. Like he's one of my favorite receivers. He's
hmm
big, he's physical, he does everything that Andy Reid would want out of a receiver. The sky's the limit. And then the sky was the limit, and they played New England in the Super Bowl, and I thought, this could finally be it. Like it could finally happen. And then, it fell apart, and we struggled to find a big, tough, physical receiver for quite some time. But yeah, that era was a lot of fun. I just remember guys like Corey Simon or Jeremiah Trotter really making that defense so physical and so much fun to watch on a week to week basis.
yeah, and that's one of those things where we're kind of getting back to that where we have the franchise quarterback you can rely on. You have the lockdown defense, especially when our cornerbacks get back. I mean, we could do a lot. And then next year you get Jordan Hicks back; he'll be healthy. So hopefully we re-sign Nigel Bradham, and then we'll see what happens with Kendricks. But I think this defense is really doing big things now too. It's kind of similar to that '04 defense.
Bradham's actually been a huge surprise. I honestly didn't know much about him when he came over from Buffalo. He seemingly came over with Schwartz. I have a friend of mine who's from Buffalo, and he said good things about Bradham when he first came over, and I was like, okay, like I can't remember the last guy on defense I remember playing in Buffalo that played well, but just to get
Mhm.
him, he's been a very, very consistent tackler. That's one thing they do very well from the linebacking core. It's a linebacking core that tackles extremely well, which makes it a really easy for the safeties and defensive backs to do their job as well when they have such talented tacklers such as Kendricks and Hicks before he got hurt was playing out of his mind and Bradham's played extremely well. Joe Walker played well against San Francisco. So I've been impressed with the linebacking core and how they've tackled all year.
Yeah, and it's funny too because at the beginning of the season I was thinking because Bradham, I mean he missed a couple big tackles. I think the one was Washington when Chris Thompson scored, and I was thinking like, man, Bradham looks rough, and then ever since then he's been playing out of his mind.
Yeah. What was since you've been a lifelong Eagle fan and we can count the Super Bowl in this? 'Cause I know I've got mine, but what were some of the toughest games as an Eagles fan for you to watch as far as like just that sick, sad, heartbreaking type feeling that you get watching football?
Uh, Probably. I don't know if it was 2002 or 2000. I think it was 2003 when they lost to Tampa Bay in the NFC Championship. Was that the year?
Oh, the Rondé Barber pick.
Yes, that
Yes,
was
I know,
bad.
bro.
And then after that, the following season, when they opened up their first game at Lincoln Financial Field, they played Tampa Bay and just got completely shut down on Monday Night Football.
Hmm. I remember the game. I remember that game very well. Man. Yeah, that I remember as a kid where I was watching that Rondé Barber pick six when McNabb threw that through what seemed like a just a down the like a quick route at the goal line, and Rondé Barber took it back, and
Yeah,
yeah,
it was
that was a rough
brutal.
one for me. That was a rough one. The Arizona NFC Championship game was always really rough for me too because Edgerrin James slowly but surely took them down the field in Arizona to get them in position to win that game and go on to the Super Bowl. But then they had time to get down the field, and Kevin Curtis had a ball go through his hand. So it's been a lot of heartbreak. But what are some of your favorite Eagle games of all time? I know mine would have been easily the Miracle at the Meadowlands.
Oh yeah, that's a classic. I probably still watch that probably like once a week.
Yeah, that one and the one against Washington on Monday night with Vic when he just teed off. Like they were up quick. I
Yeah,
know
that
they
was
like.
Monday Night Massacre.
Yes, yeah, that was a good one. That was one I always look back and watch fondly, just because of how much fun they were and how fast they were on offense.
Yeah, that was a good game. I actually thought that they were gonna do Monday Night Massacre Part 2 last week, but
I did too.
it didn't turn out like that. But I mean, if you think about it, it was almost a 3 possession win. That one touchdown they scored was in garbage time, so it wasn't a massacre, but I mean, it was a convincing win.
Absolutely. So you've been an Eagles fan your whole life, grew up in Philly. I got a question because I get this all the time living out here where there's not a lot of Eagle fans.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think this fan base is so polarizing to people outside of Philadelphia?
Uh, it's definitely it's definitely just the crazy passionate attitude of the city. It just like people are so different out here with their personalities. They're real like just raw, and they say what's on their mind. And I think that kind of turns other fan bases off. And I think Eagles fans they let their emotions run wild, and they don't really think before they say stuff, and they just kind of they'll say whatever, and it's funny. I mean, I enjoy it. I don't know how people out there like it, but yeah, I don't know. It's just one of
See,
those things where people they just hate the Eagles fan base. I have no idea why.
I get that a lot too. Like I get the like I'll wear the jersey to the bar, or wear some kind of Eagle stuff to the bar, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's me growing up in California or me just kind of getting older and not really getting like I don't have a burning desire to start being loud when I'm watching the games. Like at bars where I don't know people, but like you wear that jersey and people instantly think like you take on this personality of just being a complete jerk or an asshole. And even when I was in Philadelphia to watch a couple years ago, I finally made the trip to watch
Mm-hmm.
them play the Dolphins. It was the game they lost by a point, and I found Eagle fans like to be extremely nice, extremely welcoming and friendly, and there was no issue. But it was always very interesting to me because every time I'll tell someone I'm an Eagle fan, like 90% of the time, it's like, oh, those fan bases are jerks, and you always get the same couple things like you booed Santa Claus, and you start fights in the stands and this and that. It just seems like it's such a negative perception around that fan base. So I'm always interested to hear from people who have grown up around that. Like if you feel it's something negative, or you might feel that it's just normal to sort of have a different level of passion for your team.
Yeah, I mean that whole Santa Claus thing, that'll never be put to rest, although it should be.
Yeah.
But yeah, we hear about that all the time, and I don't know. I mean, I go to the games. I think the environment's a lot more calm now. Like in the new stadium, it's a lot more families going and whatnot. But there's always that one fan that starts something that it kind of, and then the camera phones now are out all the time, so anything that's bad that goes wrong gets caught on video, and then it kind of goes back to these guys booed Santa Claus and now they're fighting in the stands. So it's
Yeah,
just one of those things that carries over.
I agree, man. So I wanted to ask you this because we were talking about this on the show that I do with my friends every now. We do this every once a week with my friends, and they know I'm a huge Eagle fan, and they know kind of what I've been through, the ups and downs of being a fan. And we were
Hmm.
talking about how Dodger tickets right now are about, I think behind home plate was about $70,000 to sit behind home plate, and yeah, it's insane.
That's crazy.
And they asked me, they said, "Would like how much would you pay to watch Philadelphia in the Super Bowl?" And I'm slowly starting to build myself up. Like, I don't know if you do this, but I'm starting to like rationalize it in my head where I'm like, well, Aaron Rodgers is out. I mean, the Rams aren't really that good. Like, we can beat the Saints, we can beat the Cowboys. They get home field. Like, it's not impossible for them to be playing a
It's
game
not.
in February. So
And
if that happens,
before you move on from that too, I just want to mention that, speaking of the whole fan base thing, I feel like if the Eagles did win the Super Bowl this year, it would be the year of, well, the NFL was bad that year,
of course,
and we have to fully prepare ourselves for that.
which is absolutely fine because I've made this argument a lot to where like that wouldn't bother me because all I would say is just, well, we still got a title. Like, I
Yeah,
would just repeat
exactly.
that. I would just have like one of those "Hi, my name is" signs on every Eagles shirt that I wear, and just say, "Yeah, the NFL was bad, but we still got the ring." Like, that Lombardi Trophy looks the exact same whether the NFL was great or the NFL was bad. It would mean very, very little to me. But I was going to ask you, would you want to go watch that? Like, where I think the Super Bowl's in Minnesota. And we were asking this on the show we did last week. Would you want to watch that in Minnesota at the Super Bowl live, or would you want to watch that like in Philadelphia, whatever your normal routine is to watch the games?
It's crazy you ask because I was I was out this weekend and I was talking about it to some friends. Um, I actually the first time where the the 2004 season when the Eagles went to the Super Bowl, I actually went in Jacksonville.
Really?
Yeah, and I mean I was pretty young, but for what it was cool. But at the same time, after the loss, it turned into a really bad experience. It was just terrible. So I'm thinking that I probably wouldn't go this season to the Super Bowl, but I would definitely, go out and watch it somewhere. So in case they do win, I'm partying in the streets of Philly.
Then that's the same thing that I had said. Was I told my friends, I'm like, look, you could give me tickets, you could give me all of that, and I went to a lot of the NFL stuff when the Super Bowl was out here in Santa Clara. They did a lot of that stuff in San Francisco, so you kind of go to like the punt, pass, and kick, and
Yeah.
all the interactive stuff. Which I'm gonna tell you right now, the older you get, they have a thing like one of the exhibitions to where you can throw a football like 30 yards, 40 yards, 50 yards to do the accuracy test. I
Hmm.
loaded up and threw that as far as I could to where I hurt my shoulder, and I was like, "Oh, that only went 40 yards." Like, wow, like I've this is it. It ages you quickly to realize how far you can't throw a football on a daily basis without either your elbow or your shoulder hurting. So I got to do all that, and even if they like, even if they get in this year, I would just want to watch the game with a couple of the friends that live out here I have from Philadelphia. Watch kind of do the same routine I do every week, just because for me, like if it happens to where like they win, I want to be able to have that moment to say that I was with some of my closest friends, and I wouldn't necessarily be partying in the streets of Sacramento because I'd probably be the only one.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
like just to have that experience with my friends in that are from Philadelphia or have known me my whole life, to have that with them like at a house party, eating good food and stuff like that, celebrating that victory, I think would be really cool.
Yeah, well, I mean, hey, if they make it and you want to come to Philly, you're more than welcome to stay with me.
No, I'm not lying to you. And it's like we were watching my girlfriend and we had friends over on Sunday to watch the game, and we were watching the game, and I'm like we might have to start looking at flights for that
Yeah.
parade, like not the game, but the parade itself, because like we were watching it. I'm like, wait, like okay, when exactly? We started looking at flights from Sacramento to Philadelphia because I wouldn't want to go watch the game, but I would love to be there for the parade.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I was around for the World Series in 2008 when the Phillies won. And I mean, that was just a crazy series of events. I mean, even the night that it happened, they literally closed off streets in the city just so everyone could party, and it was probably one of the greatest times of my life.
I could only imagine. I've never had one of my proteins be able to give me that amount of joy. Obviously, me being a Kings fan, I mean, there's nowhere to go but up, I guess. I mean, this process that you Sixer fans are talking about, we have to sort of adopt that out here in Philadelphia too, because it's getting kind of rough.
Yeah, it's it. You know what? I'm still dealing with it, the process out here with the Sixers. But I mean, things look up. We're dealing with the Eagles. Eagles had a little process going there. We had that little Chip Kelly experiment, and
Oh
it
yeah.
didn't work out. So, but now at least things are looking better. Now we're over here talking Super Bowl.
Yeah, it feels good to be over here talking about that kind of stuff. Just real quickly, what were your memories of the Chip Kelly era? Because I mean, that seems to be the running joke that we traded LaShawn McCoy and we did all this and that. But how did you experience that Chip Kelly era and being in Philadelphia and being a fan of the team?
Oh man, I wasn't on the whole Chip Kelly train with everything. I was thinking like, man, this guy comes from college. I'm not too big on watching a ton of college football, but I did know about Oregon, and I knew Oregon, was one of them offenses. They'll put up 50 points, but their defense will let up 52 points.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things, and it's just like, you don't want to deal with that in the NFL because we've seen that so many times. And again, through that whole Chip Kelly era, we had Bradley, Fletcher, Carrie
Oh,
Williams. These guys are getting torched.
yeah.
So I wasn't a fan of Chip. And then obviously I fell into the Nick Foles is the answer at quarterback train. And and then I got pissed off. He traded him away for Bradford. I'm like, Sam Bradford, you kidding me?
Mhm.
So I mean, I wasn't a fan of Chip at all. I hated that he traded McCoy. I didn't really care for him cutting Deshaun Jackson, but again, I was like, why would you cut Deshaun Jackson? You can get some trade value out of him, but I just think Chip just, he tried to change the culture or whatever he called it, and it just didn't work out.
I agree. I know for a fact I bought into all of it. I bought into the Kale, the habits reflect the mission, and then that preseason where Bradford had a really good preseason. I think this is kind of one of the first things that we joked about to where I totally bought in on all of it. Like he had a career game against Green Bay in the preseason. I was like, oh, this is it. Like we got it. And then the game started to matter. And that was actually, and anyone who knows me will tell you, that was the moment where I just stopped paying any attention to preseason football. Like I
Yeah,
just, it that broke me.
I wrote about that. I think it was probably around when we played the Packers this year in the preseason,
Mm-hmm.
and I said, I remember just a bunch of people around here were talking kind of how we're talking now about Super Bowl, except we weren't 7-1 in the regular season. We were, playing preseason football, and
Yeah.
everyone's talking about Super Bowl.
I was right there with them, man. So, I mean that whole thing can be a whole podcast that we can do a different time. But um, real quick, inside the Eagles again, where can people follow that or follow you on social media? I know you guys do a lot of good stuff. I really liked the grading that you guys did with the Eagles or the Eagles draft picks. I'm high on Roswell Douglas. I want to believe in Derek Barnett. So you guys do a lot of good stuff over there. Where can people get more of that information, and where can more people find you on social media?
Yeah, you can follow Inside the Eagles. It's at Inside Eagles on Twitter. They also have a Facebook, and then you can follow me on Twitter at J Grasso. I'll spell it out: Grasso, not Grasso, and underscore too. By the way, I couldn't get the J Grasso alone, so I need the underscore it.
Oh,
But yeah, I mean, we do everything from, we give you sources from other sites as well. We also share our own articles. We live tweet the games. We do all that.
cool, man. Hey, I really appreciate you taking the time. Real quick from myself, you can check out all 68 episodes of the Gully Blanchard podcast wherever you find your podcast by searching Gully Blanchard. I've talked to guys like Nick Lacone from Philly Influencer, DJ Folk, who DJs for Young Jeezy. A lot of the guys out here in Sacramento, whether it be Damian Barling or Jason Jones, who cover the Sacramento Kings. Once a week, my friends and I do sort of a fun show where we make fun of all kinds of things. We had a ball making fun of the Miami Dolphins O-line coach. If I find it funny, chances are you guys probably will too. You can follow me on Twitter at Gully Blanchard, which is GULLYBLANCHARD. I'm pretty active on there, depending on what I've got going on a day-to-day basis. Justin, man, thank you so much for the time, man. I really appreciate it. We've got to do this again once we get into the playoffs.
Definitely, man. Thanks for having me. And yeah, whenever you want to come to Philly, let me know. I'll pick you up.
Absolutely, man. I appreciate that.
All right, man. Thanks.
All right, you guys take it easy now. Be back next week.